Hi and welcome back to the next video in the Dominion video tutorial series. This video I want to talk about deck paradigms, and there are two deck paradigms that are important to understand in Dominion in a general sense. They're called the money density paradigm and the whole deck paradigm, and the way you can distinguish between the two of these paradigms is how you measure how good your turns are. So in a money density paradigm, your output each turn is measured by the total output of your deck divided by the portion of your deck that you can expect to draw in a turn. And a whole deck paradigm is your per turn output is just measured by the total output of your deck. So since you're drawing all of your deck, you're dividing just by 100%, which is 1. And so it's kind of a special case of the money density paradigm. But the reason it's an entire paradigm is a lot of stuff changes, and it's stuff that's worth talking about. So let's talk a little bit about the money density paradigm. And I want to get into what is the concept of money density. And you're going to hear this in a lot of different forms if you look around, but the idea is it's kind of the average value in terms of money that each card is giving you. So if I have my starting deck, which is 7 coppers and 3 estates, the estates can be 0, the coppers can be 1, and so my money density is 0.7 money per card. And so if I'm drawing 5 cards on a turn, and that's my money density, I multiply 5 by 0.7, I get 3.5 money density per turn. And you're going to see that in your first 2 turns of the game. The average money density is, your average money each turn is 3.5 money, but you're going to get a 3 and a 4 or something like that, because you're not going to have a half of a money, right? And it's important to note that your starting deck is in this paradigm. You're not drawing your whole deck, and you're not usually going to be able to just get rid of enough cards so that you can draw your whole deck at the start of the game. And so when you add cards to your deck, like a silver, for example, that's going to increase your money density. And how much and why and all of this stuff is important to remember that you're in this paradigm at the start of the game. Another thing about this paradigm is that it only requires cards that are available in every game. The basic treasures, copper, silver, gold, and the victory cards, I guess. It's not required to have those to be in the paradigm, but you do want to win the game. I guess that's important. And it isn't. This strategy is always something you can do in a game because it only requires cards that are available in every game. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's always viable because a lot of attack cards hit this kind of paradigm pretty hard. And there's also stuff like Bandit Fort and whatever that punishes you for putting golds and silvers in your deck. So you may need to find other alternatives to what's available every game to kind of get around that issue that may be presented towards a deck like this. The important metric here about money density is, now that we know how to measure how good our turns are expected to be, we can measure the effect we have by adding a new card to the deck. So when you add a good card to your deck, your per turn output is increased by the value of that card divided by the percentage of your deck that you're going to draw in a turn. Or you might say it's increased by the value of that card minus the average value of cards in your deck. You can look at it in a couple of different ways, but if I add a silver to my deck, I'm not going to increase my money density by 2, right? That would be insane. I'm not going to increase my per turn output by 2. That would also be insane. What I am doing is I'm just increasing the money density. I'm also increasing the number of cards in my deck. So it's going to be diluted by the fact that I'm not going to draw that card every turn. I'm only going to draw it maybe once every 3 turns, or every 4 turns, or something like that. So this really isn't that much. So adding cards to a money density deck is going to have a pretty small effect. But I guess the good news is this holds for bad cards too. If I'm buying provinces or whatever, then my deck is less negatively affected by that. So that's something, I guess. And now let's talk a little bit about the whole deck paradigm. So as the percentage of your deck that you expect to draw on your turn approaches 100%, that's how you get into this paradigm. And I would say that you're in this paradigm if you can play all of the cards, or even most of the cards, in your deck that you actually want to play. And I understand that there's a little bit of a gray area here. You can still measure the output of your deck using money density. That's definitely not the point. And a whole bunch of stuff changes, and that's basically what the rest of this video is about. So let's talk about the bad things about the whole deck paradigm. It is a temporary paradigm, right? On any given turn in a game, or at some point when I've drawn my deck, then yes, I am in the whole deck paradigm. But then what do you want to do? Normally, you're going to be adding cards to your deck, right? And if those cards are not draw, or they're not at least cantrips, if they're stop cards or anything like that, or even if they're victory cards, then you may not be able to draw your deck the next turn. And so you may not be in this paradigm anymore. Or maybe the chances of you not doing that are lower. And so it does take effort to stay in the paradigm. Now, you could just do nothing and have your deck do the same thing every turn, but you need points to win, so that's probably not the best thing. It's something you always have to do, pretty much, and this also includes not only the cards you're putting in your deck, but like if you're getting junked by your opponent, you have to account for that too. And it's not only does that make it harder to get into this paradigm, but like if you can't deal with the junks your opponent's giving you as they're coming in, and let's say there's one turn where you show weakness and you don't draw your deck, then it's going to be really, really hard to get back there because it might be hard to line up your trasher with things that you want to trash, for example. So you have to expend effort continuously to stay in this paradigm. And as you green, it's frequently not worth it to stay in this paradigm all the way through the end of the game. So it is temporary. And I think that's a really important concept because at the start of the game, you are not in this paradigm. You are not drawing your deck at the start of the game. And as you go through the game, at some point, maybe you will be, and that's great. But unless you expend effort to stay in there, you're not going to stay there. So that is it. That's the bad thing about the whole deck paradigm. It's work to get there, and it's work to stay there. Everything else is upside. And drawing your deck is really great, and now I'm going to talk about that a lot. So why do you want to draw your deck? There are a ton of reasons. The first one is, and I think this is the most important, the output of your turn is now just the output of your whole deck. It's pretty easy to calculate, I guess. So if you don't like math, then sure, you just look at what your turn was, and great, that's my per turn output. Notably, when you add a good card to your deck, as long as you stay in that paradigm, your per turn output is just increased by the entire value of that card. You're no longer subtracting or dividing the value of that card by how much of your deck you plan to draw or the difference in money density or whatever. You're just adding that to your deck. So if I add a silver, I'm now making $2 per turn every single turn as long as I can draw that silver. That's pretty great. You can increase the capability of each of your turns much, much faster than you could in a money density paradigm, and this is why you can do it. The other thing is, you actually get to see that good card much quicker. The latest you could see that good card and enjoy its effects is next turn, and a lot of times you can do it even sooner, where in the money density paradigm, you're going to be waiting an entire shuffle, which could be several turns. So, that's definitely a lot worse, and that has ramifications that we'll talk about. You can attack opponents as much as the kingdom allows every single turn, and this actually tends to punish decks that are in the money density paradigm, like I mentioned before, the most. So this is a reason, these are definitely reasons why you want to go for this paradigm, because if you don't go for this paradigm, you're probably going for the money density paradigm, and that means you're vulnerable to these attacks. So getting attacked every single turn as much as possible, if that's possible, or if that seems bad to you, probably want to invest towards drawing your deck if that can be done. You can adapt to game situations or like your opponent's plays a lot more quickly. So, the biggest and most obvious example, I think, is you get more control over when the game ends. If you're gaining more cards, you have more control over 3-pile endings. Or if you decide, if I can end the game in 2 turns by doing this, and I draw all those cards, and then I play those cards and I do a thing, you can actually map that out and say, I can end the game in 2 turns. And if that's good for you, then you can either threaten to do that and make your opponent score some points. Maybe they didn't want to. You get a whole bunch of more options. Also, I would say in games with more than 2 players, with 3 or more players, there's more unknown factors. You have 2 opponents doing things. And as the game goes on, there's definitely a lot more to react to. And so you want to be able to react to it more quickly so you can more effectively take advantage of a situation that might be to your advantage, or mitigate some attack that they got that they might be playing on you or something like that. And then another big thing is, let's see you see 2 cards in the kingdom that have synergy. They're really good together, but they need to be drawn together. I play 1 card and then I play another card. They're really good together. If I can't draw them in the same turn, they're a lot worse, and that's bad. But if you're drawing your whole deck, you can very reliably draw those things together, the card combinations. And so you can take advantage of those synergies, and you can build decks that are generally a lot higher powered, and just by the fact that you're able to draw everything together that you want to. So what do you need to know about drawing your deck? I mean, drawing your deck is really, really great, but let's go for reasons that you wouldn't want to draw your deck, because those also exist. And by the way, you really do need something very compelling here. I mean, I've talked about a lot of really, really hard-hitting reasons why drawing your deck is really, really good. And so you want a strong reason not to do it. The first one is there's no draw. You can't draw your deck because there's no draw. Well, yeah, that's pretty compelling. But hey, even if you can trash down to like just a 5 stop card deck, if that deck can't win you the game with just those 5 stop cards, and that includes every victory card that you want to add to your deck, then yeah, you don't want to build that deck. So yes, of course, even if there's no draw and I can trash down to 5 cards, woo, I'm in the whole deck paradigm. But like, obviously, think about how you're going to win the game from that. And so if there's no draw, that's kind of a big deal. There are very few decks that are okay with just having 5 stop cards. I mean, they usually just get a bunch of VP tokens or something like that. Or maybe the draw is just really, really tenuous or annoying or tough to come by, or maybe you can't get it going fast enough to win. That would also be another reason that would push you away from trying to draw your deck. What about supporting payload? We did talk about this in the last video. We were talking about like the best turns you can have in terms of the given deck control resources available. If it takes, I mean, it definitely does take more time to dedicate yourself into drawing your deck, entering this whole deck paradigm. So you're going to either need a way to catch up in points, and a lot of times that means something more than a province per turn, because that's what your money density opponent might be able to do. Or you can shut your opponent down with attacks like I saw before. So you're looking for something in addition, and you are going to have to look for the kingdom to support that. So something you need to look for, say you can draw your deck, you need to actually find a reason to draw your deck. And there are tons of them out there, but you need one, right? And then also, let's just say that if money density decks have the tools to close out the game with an early points lead. So like if they are able to mill provinces, trash provinces from the supply effectively, or there's like easy treasure floods with like high value treasures, so like they can really quickly flood with silver or gold. That can be really good for helping them close out the game. Maybe there's easy defense. They can just shrug off attacks. If Lighthouse is out, then like, oh, I can just spam Lighthouses instead of Silvers, and I really don't care about what you're doing. Or a lot of times they can just get enough points fast enough that they can effectively get like 50% of the available VP. So if you think, oh, well, they can get to 6 provinces and they're going to have trouble getting to 7 or 8, well, if they're going to get 6 provinces and I have no other source of points besides duchies, maybe that's a reason I don't want to invest the time into this, because they can get an early lead and then they get enough extra time to close out the game, get a couple duchies, or maybe find the money for that 7th province. So let's talk about a little more of what you need to know. If you're in the whole deck paradigm, there's a ton of stuff that changes, and here's a bunch more stuff. So let's talk about the way deck control changes. Like, in order to be in this paradigm and stay in this paradigm, you do have to be constantly adding deck control cards to your deck in order to, be able to draw more stuff, right? And so the role of deck control, it changes from, well, I want to just draw more cards to increase my per turn output because I'm drawing more cards, and, that means more money, right? Now it's, I want to draw all of the cards in my deck. And so the meaning of deck control does change, and the types of cards we buy and why we buy them change. So let's talk about dudding. Whole deck paradigm, when you're drawing your deck, you're usually going to have some non-zero chance of dudding. And that means you don't draw your deck, or you're not able to play all of the cards in your deck that you want to play, right? That was kind of the definition. And, you can always have that chance. Most decks like this do. If they have 5 or more stop cards, then you could just start your hand with 5 stop cards, and you didn't get your deck control, and you don't get to draw your other payload, and that's always going to be a risk. You would really like to minimize the chances of that happening, and you'd also like to maximize what you can do on those dud turns. So how can you do that? Well, the big thing, and this relates to deck control, is you really want your deck control at the start of your turn and the payload at the end of your turn. And, this is the changing role of deck control, and I've called this cycling in the past, the concept of playing your best cards more often. In a money density deck, the idea was, I have good cards, I want to play one every turn, right? In this case, the meaning of that is I want my deck control at the start of my turn, and I want the payload at the end of my turn. How can you do that? The big ones are if you have like duration cards or start of turn effects that are deck control, or maybe you can top deck some extra deck control cards. I drew everything last turn, and now I'm gonna stash away like an extra village on the top of my deck, because that's gonna help me draw next turn, right? So being able to do that with your deck control cards is the main way, or obviously the duration stuff as well. Just look for what tools the Kingdom has for allowing your deck to be more reliable, minimizing the chances you have to dud. Also, there is a difference in payload, right? A lot of times, if there was a really good payload card and you were in the money density deck paradigm, the idea would be, I want to play one every turn, and so I'm going to buy a bunch of them, right? But if you're drawing your deck every turn, then you want to spam payload cards so that you can play multiple copies in a turn. So if you have a card like Militia or something that like I can play 4 militias in a turn, but that's the same effect. So my opponent's playing 1 militia in a turn, then yeah, you probably only need 1 militia. But if I'm playing money density, I might be getting more, just so I can increase the chances that I play one every turn. And also, in terms of payload cards that you want to play a lot of in a turn, like a Goons or something, once you identify that card and say, that's the payload card, I want to play a lot of it, then you're going to need to buy a lot of that card. And this is one way that you can identify important splits, right? And so you can prioritize them appropriately. So if you know this coming in, you can build your deck to be like, well, maybe this doesn't increase my per turn output, but I can get 7 Goons if I do it this way. And then, that's another really good thing you can do against your opponent. Spamming deck control cards, a lot of the reason you do that is just to increase the chance that you start your turn with a deck control card that you care about, even if you don't play all of them every turn. So like you might have extras to save them for next turn, or you might have extras that you just don't play. Council Room is a card that comes to mind, right? I might have an extra Council Room in my deck that I don't really need to play all of them, and I don't want to because I don't want to give my opponent extra cards. But just to increase the chances that I draw one at the beginning of my turn, I might put an extra one in my deck. And so this actually, I mean, it does sound kind of sad, and it kind of is, because like you bought this card and you don't really need to play it. But in a lot of cases, it really is worth doing just so you can make sure you stay in this paradigm, because it's so stinking good to do it. And this concept, actually, of drawing more cards of what's in your deck, it's called overdraw. And there's an entire another video about that, which is the next video in this series. So, I mean, we've just entered the tip of the iceberg when it comes to drawing your deck, and it's really great. And there's definitely a lot of things that you need to consider that are different than if you're in a money density paradigm. I would just want to say one thing here. I've referred to this as the whole deck paradigm, drawing your deck. A lot of people will call the whole deck paradigm an engine, but I want you to keep in mind that the real strategic distinction here is drawing your deck. It's not playing a lot of action cards, it's not trashing, it's not consistency or anything else. Those things are good, but what you care about is the result of drawing your deck. Drawing your deck is what matters here, okay? So a lot of times if people say engine, this is really what they care about, or maybe just the concept of draw, okay? In any case, that's what we care about. Next video is going to expand on this topic. Thank you for watching.